Welcome to Puro Politics, the political podcast of the San Antonio Express News. My name is Gilbert Garcia, Metro columnist, and I'm joined by
business editor Greg Jefferson.
And it's just going to be the two of us today. This is actually going to be our last podcast for the year. We're going to take a short break and come back right after the Christmas holidays. I think the first week of January, we're going to pick things up again. And as many of you know, we're down to the last week of candidate filing for the March 2020 primary. I think December 9th, next Monday, is going to be the deadline. So we're starting to see a lot of how the races are shaping up, but we're going to learn more about it in the next few days. And when we come back and pick up the podcast, we'll know more. Before we go on, I want to also mention to you, for those of you who are weekly listeners of the podcast, we are starting a kind of it's called a speaking series or around San Antonio, which will probably be about every 6 weeks or so, where I'll be interviewing sort of local people on the political scene. And the first one is going to be December 11th. It'll be a week from Wednesday, and it'll be at the Express News downtown. I'll be interviewing Henry Cisneros, and we'll be talking a lot about San Antonio's past, present, and future. A lot of questions, I'm sure, about transportation, which he's been really involved in. And so it's an event for subscribers or anybody who's been thinking about subscribing. This is a really good opportunity to do that. And we'll keep you posted on some of the ones coming up. I wanted to get a chance to talk with Greg a little bit because we are starting to see what the races are going to be like in March. And there's certain, I think campaigns that are going to be particularly interesting or as we go forward. I mean, the one that sticks out to me is U.S. District 23, where you got Will Hurd, a Republican who's been barely getting by, winning these really close elections. He's after 3 terms decided that he didn't want to seek another term. He was kind of somewhat of a critic of Donald Trump, but not really.
I mean, talk about being in an uncomfortable position for somebody who's, I mean, you can catch a lot of hell for this, but who's fairly moderate.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I mean, he's not a hard right Republican. And and this, he's just had, I think he's spent more time squirming in the last 3 years than he would care to do.
Seeing the Intelligence Committee hearings on impeachment week before last, and Will Hurd speaking at the end and basically laying out his opinion on this, declaring he's not going to vote for impeachment, but he's bothered by how Donald Trump handled the Ukraine situation, his request for an investigation into Joe Biden. I think you saw really all the internal conflict that really what it means to be a Republican representing District 23.
Well, yeah, and not only that, but being a Republican who aspires to higher office. I think he's been pretty clear that he's not, his political career is not over.
Right.
With his retirement from the House. Whether it's a Senate race or a gubernatorial race down the road, who knows? But I mean, I think he's still having to be mindful of Trump's base and appealing to it.
Yeah, it's kind of the Nikki Haley position of like right. if it all falls apart for Trump in 2020, come to me. I wasn't quite like him, but at the same time, if he gets a second term,
but I wasn't quite not like him.
That's right. And I think the challenge for him too has been like this is a guy who served in the CIA for several years, and pretty much our intelligence agencies are pretty much now being depicted as sort of deep state right. cockroaches. I mean, I don't want to venture too far off of this, but one of the things that struck me when in watching him deal with that, because I know how much he sort of admires the work that the intelligence community does, and he was part of it. That we're almost back to the point where we saw the counterculture in the late 60s, early 70s, basically, saying the intelligence agencies, they're all conspiring against, the political underground, and they're just, and we can't trust them, and we're seeing a little bit of that from like the Trump supporters now.
Yeah,
like
these come around. Yeah. FBI, CIA, like all of those institutions, it's the man. The longer they've served, the man is out to get us.
The more suspicious they are. So anyway, picking up the pieces in District 23, now we got And this is as close to a 50-50 congressional district as you'll find in the United States. And you got Gina Ortiz Jones, former Air Force intelligence officer who now who lost to Will Hurd by, I think it was a fraction of 1% in 2018. She's running again. On the Republican side, we've got a military veteran named Tony Gonzalez, who grew up here and is relocated after fulfilling his military duties. He's got a lot of work to do as far as just becoming known. It's such a sprawling district, goes out to West Texas. I mean, we're still figuring this out, but what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an understatement to say he has his work cut out for him. I mean, I think she made a lot of inroads in 23 2 years ago. And, she came within less than 1,000 votes of defeating an incumbent. And, it was not an easy race for her, but she did, she demonstrated kind of a command of the issues, especially on national security and intelligence. I mean, and that was Will Hurd's strength. And she took the fight straight to him. She, demonstrated that she was capable of raising, more than capable of raising money. I mean, she did quite well with fundraising.
Absolutely.
So she's, on the Democratic side, she's, I think any Democrat who gets in the race would have a hard time beating her in the primary. And in the general election, she's kind of carved out a place for herself as an attractive candidate, knowledgeable, well-spoken, with an ability to raise money. And it's going to be tough for any Republican to stop that. I
think that's right. And Bexar County is such a big part of that district. And I think that there's every reason to think that it's going to be 2016, the last presidential election, was a really good year for Democrats in Bexar County. And I think there's a reason to think that's...
That said, I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, surely, the Republican Congressional Campaign Committee, they couldn't just be giving this seat out. I mean, they must be recruiting somebody,
right? And Tony, I mean, there are going to be other candidates in the race, but Tony Gonzalez, I think, has emerged. The interesting thing about him is he came back to San Antonio, started planning months ahead of time that he was going to run in. I believe he was going to run in U.S. District 21.
Right.
Or no, I take it back. I think he was going to run for Joaquin Castro seat in 20.
Yeah.
And within 2 or 3 days of his official announcement, Will Hurd decides he's retiring, so he shifted over.
And I don't get the sense that he's been recruited, though. I mean, It just seems like this is something he wants to do. I just wonder.
That's right.
I wonder if the national Republicans are looking for a candidate who's maybe a little better known.
That's a good question.
A little better able to raise money.
He did get an endorsement from Will Hurd, and I mean, he's there. There is a sense that he's at this point, unless someone else emerges, he's probably in the best position. But the general election, as you said, is going to be really, really tough for him. We're looking at basically the same piece of political geography, or part of it. In Senate District 19, we got Pete Flores, who's a Republican who won. It was a stunning upset in a special election last year when Carlos Uresti had to step down. It had been a Democratic seat for a long time. Pete Flores, this Republican, ended up winning it. You're looking probably at Roland Gutierrez, state representative, or Xochitl Rodriguez, who is the daughter of former Congressman Ciro Rodriguez. They're the two that have really emerged on the Democratic side. How likely is it that Pete Flores is going to be a one and done sort of state senator, or not even that full term, I guess?
Well, I mean, it's in part, presidential. What happens with Donald Trump is the overlay on every race going in, next year. If it's Roland, he's shown himself to be a pretty aggressive candidate. I mean, he did some real damage to the other Pete Gallego. I mean, kind of mortally wounded him. It could be, I wouldn't be surprised if it's Roland, if he comes out on top, if it's Sochi. I don't know. I mean, I just don't know enough about her, her style, her campaign.
Yeah, and this is her first campaign, and so we're we're going to learn a lot in the next couple of months on that. In U.S. District 21, now this is one that has been is almost the opposite of state Senate District 19, it's been sort of a foregone conclusion that it's a Republican seat. We had Lamar Smith there for, I think, over 30 years, and it's been dominated by the Republican Party. But Chip Roy, who succeeded Lamar Smith, won a very close race last year over Joseph Kopser from Austin. This district includes some of South Austin and parts of San Antonio and the areas between. And we're looking at the likely nominee being Wendy Davis on the Democratic side. And so this is an interesting one because Wendy Davis obviously has a lot of name recognition. She ran for governor in 2014. She became kind of a national phenomenon the year before that when she had her famous filibuster on the abortion issue. And yet at the same time, she lost badly in the governor's race. What do we make of that?
Can't be, justifiably portrayed as a carpetbagger in this district.
That's right, because she represented it was a Fort Worth area.
Fort Worth. Yeah. So I mean, this is way out of her home base. So it'll be seen as kind of an opportunistic play here. And Kopser, he was a veteran. He was a moderate and he
business owner.
Yeah, business owner, and he did a lot of work at the grassroots in this district. And he was at it for a couple of years. I mean, he wasn't a dilettante about it. Not to say that she is. Like, obviously, she's got political credibility, but this is territory that she's just not represented before.
That's right. Actually, I guess she's been in Austin for a while, but as far as like representing
right.
That area.
Yeah. No, it's just not her. It's not her home base. This is this is territory, especially once you get into San Antonio. That's yes, she ran for governor, but people don't know her, personally. They've not met with her.
You also get into the whole sort of philosophical issue of whenever you have a district like this, which is leans one way, but it's at least seen as a potential gain by the other party. Are you better off? I think the traditional view has been you would pick a centrist or someone who has the ability to appeal to members of both parties to be able to steal some votes and some independents. And so Joseph Kopser sort of fit that profile. He was seen as kind of as a centrist. Wendy Davis was caricatured as an ultra liberal in 2014. So I mean the question becomes. Is it a bad fit for the district, or is that old paradigm? Is that just does not apply? Because one thing we did see with Beto O'Rourke ran as pretty much as an unabashed progressive in 2018 for the U.S. Senate, and nonetheless was able to steal a few Republican votes just because of his personality.
Are the views of Wendy Davis kind of hardened in this pretty conservative district? Yeah, and I think probably I mean, I think when people they hear Wendy Davis, the first thing they probably think about are the running shoes and her the pink running shoes and her filibuster against abortion restrictions. So I mean, is it is it possible for her to kind of break out of that? Sure. I mean, if she had the time and money to do it, I don't know that she's got that much time and money to break up those impressions in this district. I mean, she'd have a hard time doing it, I think.
It's a tough district. Finally, I want to get to the county commissioner seat, which Kevin Wolf is vacating. This has been a solid Republican seat. We've got Trish DeBerry, who's a consultant and had ran for mayor in 2009. Is probably the biggest name there, but there are going to be several candidates on the Republican side. I guess we talked about this a little bit before when she got in the race. I mean, she has the name recognition. She has business connections. Does that add up to?
Well, I mean, it depends on how hungry Republican primary voters are for an establishment candidate. Because I mean, I can't imagine a more establishment candidate than Trish DeBerry. She's been doing crisis communications and PR work for years, and that includes a lot of political work. I mean, she's worked on behalf of SAWS, I think CPS, a lot of developers with major projects from that have sought incentives from the city and county. I mean, if the mood is totally anti-establishment, I think she's in trouble in the primary.
Yeah.
I mean, she's got. I mean, she couldn't fake it if she wanted to.
Yeah, and is it do you agree that it's basically it is a Republican seat and
Oh,
there really
yeah.
is no
I think
shot
it
at
would be-
anybody?
Yeah, I mean, you know,
Chip Haas made
Yeah,
a run about 11 years ago.
Yeah,
but,
yeah,
you know,
yeah. And he made the run 11 years. He was a pretty well regarded councilman in District 10, which is on the northeast side. But he was still a Democrat. He was a friend of the Castros.
Mm-hmm.
I assume he remains so. That didn't help, and it didn't help running against Kevin Wolf, who's he had two things going for him. You know, he was a Republican in a Republican precinct, and he had a dad whose name was Nelson Wolf. That helped too. So
yeah. I think we're also going to have a really interesting sheriff's race. We'll know more about that as we go along. But I think Javier Salazar has he's obviously had to deal with some challenges with the county jail and some issues that have come up over the past couple of years.
like letting prisoners go.
Yeah, that sort of
Like-
thing. So I mean, he's. I think that that tends to be a tough race anyway. I think
Yeah.
that you tend to have pretty close sheriff's races here, and I think that's going to be a challenge for him.
Yeah, and in this case, I mean, whether it's fair or not, I mean, a sheriff has really it's two different jobs kind of rolled into one. One's law enforcement, and then the other is running a jail. And these are two very different skills. They're really different jobs with different skills, and either one of them are hard on their own.
Mm-hmm.
But he's had a lot of problems with deputies in his ranks, getting arrested for spousal abuse, drunk driving, things like that.
Right.
And it just seems like, over the last few years, it's been kind of a steady stream of stories like that, of deputies behaving badly and getting caught. I mean, is that the department being cleaned up? Or is that just kind of the culture of the sheriff's office?
That's a good point, because I mean I don't think these issues were they were around, but we're hearing more about them, and it could be
And then on the other side, you've got a jail operation that every couple of months seems to let a prisoner go who should not be let go.
Yeah. So the sheriff's race will be very interesting. I wanted to talk a little bit before we wrap things up. One of our reporters at the Express News, Sarah Klein, had a really interesting story last week, and she went out with members of the San Antonio Department of Human Services, basically, and was they were taking a look at some homeless encampments and discussing the issue. And I think we're at about 2,900 estimated homeless people in San Antonio, and the numbers have not necessarily gone up according to what the experts are saying. But what they are saying is that they've become more conspicuous, and we're starting to see the encampments in different parts of the city. They used to be concentrated in the downtown area, and we're starting to see them in different parts of the city. I mean, one thought is that it's just that we were seeing so much development in downtown. There were vacant areas where people were camping, and those are no longer available. It's pushing people into other areas. We've also, of course, heard San Antonio's dealt with this. Austin, Seattle, other cities have dealt with the fact that housing appraisals have gone up. It's become more difficult for people to afford housing in San Antonio, and we've seen gentrification, and that this is also contributing to that. I mean, what are your thoughts?
I think it's a mix of everything you just mentioned. I mean, you've got we've got it's not an acute shortage of affordable housing, but we definitely have too few affordable homes. These are apartments and houses that people of kind of restricted means can afford. I think I'm trying to remember the number. We were shy of about 7,000 affordable housing units citywide, and this was a couple of years ago. I doubt if the situation has gotten much better. So you've got too few homes that people can, who have little or no income can afford. On top of that, you've got increasing property values, which means higher property tax bills in neighborhoods around this, kind of ringing the downtown area. That's putting pressure on people who can't pay their bills. They're getting forced out of their homes. This is in no way close to the really crisis situation you're seeing in Austin. But it's getting there. I mean, it's, we're probably 10 years, what we're seeing now is kind of Austin like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And we don't want to wind up
Right.
in the position they wound up in. And we also, we're seeing just a bunch of development in the downtown area that's putting, those are spaces that are gone. They're not habitable for, the people in the streets.
And one of the things that's happening in Austin, and of course the housing affordability in Austin is that's an extreme problem, much more severe than what we're seeing. But in July, the Austin City Council, they passed an ordinance basically allowing homeless people to camp on public streets as long as they didn't pose any threat to people. And we saw this instantaneous backlash from the political right, including Governor Greg Abbott, who's been really upset. And he's enlisted State Department of Transportation to go and give out notices and to try to sort of clean out these areas. What we were seeing, I think, primarily were homeless people camping out under highway overpasses in Austin. And what you're starting to see also is now some serious discussion in Austin about building a facility to be able to provide shelter for homeless people. And in San Antonio, we dealt with this about a decade ago with Haven for Hope. And I guess that could probably be a show unto itself. But the issue of Haven for Hope and whether it's done, it's been able to provide services to a lot of people, but has it been able to do everything that the people hoped it would?
Yeah, it's not a cure-all, and it was never. I don't think it was ever meant to be. I mean, it is. You see Governor Abbott a couple of times now on Twitter. He's highlighted Haven for Hope and said, this is a city doing the right thing for its homeless population. Just kind of basically more than anything else trying to shame the city of Austin. But I mean, Haven for Hope, it's a downtown center, and if people are being pushed out to the margins,
right.
That's not an easy trip for them to make. If you're homeless on the northeast side,
right.
It's a pretty far walk to the near west side, and on top of that, you've got there's a segment of the homeless population that's mentally ill, and a lot of among those homeless people, they don't, they're not going to go to a homeless shelter. They feel they don't want to be indoors. They don't want to be. They do have a camping area at Haven for Hope for that population, but it's hard to get them in the door.
That's right.
It's not an automatic thing. Like if you're homeless, your first thought might not be of Haven for Hope, and you might not even be aware of it.
Right. And as we talked about, I mean, this is it's a citywide challenge. It will increasingly become a citywide challenge.
Right.
I mean, it's probably going to be one of the things that we're going to be talking about a lot as we go into 2020. I think we're going to end things there. I wanted to, since it is the last show for 2019, I want to thank you all for listening, and we really appreciate it, and we always appreciate the feedback we get from you all. And I think we're going to have a really interesting 2020 election year and a lot for us to cover then. So until then, we'll hope you have a great holiday, and take care.